The next deputant is Rob Laidlaw, followed by Liz White and Amanda Corbett at the last. Hello, sir.
Good morning, committee. My name is Rob Laidlaw, and I'm here as director of the wildlife protection organization ZooCheck. We're a Toronto-based organization that started more than 32 years ago, and currently we work both in Ontario, across Canada, and overseas in a variety of different types of animal protection and wildlife conservation projects. I'm here to support the staff recommendations regarding amendments to Chapter 349's exemptions for prohibited animals. I should point out that 2 decades ago, we supported some of the current exemptions. They made sense back then, but today, given what we now know and what has transpired since that time, they don't make sense. I want to start by saying that we fully support adding the exemption for Ripley's Aquarium of Canada and continuing the exemptions for Toronto Zoo, High Park Zoo, and the other facilities currently listed in the bylaw. But we also strongly support the staff recommendation to remove the blanket exemption for CAZA-accredited facilities and for areas in which presentations are conducted. This kind of exemption is essentially a free pass that allows industry members to operate in an entirely unfettered way within the confines of the city. It also prevents the city from conducting its own due diligence to determine which facilities and organizations should be allowed into the city, and it does not allow the city an ability to provide oversight, to adequately respond to issues and concerns, and within that, there is also no ability for anyone to have any level of assurance that there's public accountability. Now, there's a lot of talk about the CAZA accreditation program, and I'm not here to demonize the program. It's good for the industry, but I do want to point out that it's not the foolproof gold standard system that says everything is fine if you've gone through it. And I'll just mention a few points. Number one, inspections, once you're an accredited member of the Zoo Association, only occur every 5 years, and they're announced. So think about that. 2 inspections per decade. Well, a lot can change in the time between the inspections. A lot changes in our own lives. It's the same for these facilities. They can change ownership. They can expand and acquire new animals. There's lots of changes that can happen that can never be anticipated when the first inspection occurs. The process of accreditation is not open and accountable to anybody. It's basically a secret process. They keep all of the information to themselves, and the results of the process are not made public. It's really a process that says, we're not going to give you any information, but trust us anyways. We know we're the experts. That's fine for industry, but that's not fine for a progressive city like the City of Toronto. Now, they're saying trust us, and I'm saying there's lots of evidence to say that we shouldn't trust them. Because just last week, the Ontario SPCA laid 5 provincial cruelty charges against an accredited member of CAZA. A short time before that, another accredited member of CAZA was charged by the Ontario SPCA. If you go back further years, there have been all kinds of issues. There have been court cases. There have been investigations by humane societies across Canada into the conduct of many accredited institutions. And the list is actually quite lengthy. Now, here in Toronto, a particular concern are those few, and it's very few, CAZA members who conduct animal presentations and shows. These are highly commercialized businesses that operate under the pretext of education. They'll take animals out from their home base or their warehouse to all kinds of venues. They'll take them to kids' parties, to weddings, to corporate events, to fairs, to festivals, to shopping malls, to pet store photo sessions. They'll put little bow ties and hats on them and play with them and do all kinds of things like that under the pretext of education. Well, these kinds of things are allowed because the exemptions that we have in the current bylaw allow for it. And that's something that really goes back to the 60s and 70s. Those things were quite prevalent in that time, but they shouldn't be going on today. There was even one accredited member of the Zoo Association that took the giant constricting pythons, very similar to the kinds that killed the 2 boys in Campbellton, New Brunswick in 2013. They take them out to children's parties and were wrapping them around young kids for photos. These kinds of things should not be happen. They They pose a significant public health and safety concern, especially when animals are brought into seniors' homes, schools, daycares, and other venues where vulnerable members of society who shouldn't be contacting these animals are exposed to them. And they're very, very different kinds of operations than the Toronto Zoo or Ripley's Aquariums or other larger permanent establishments within the city. Now, I'm not trying to demonize everybody. I'm just trying to point out that accreditation is not the panacea that some people make it out to be. Zoo industry membership is not a guarantee that things are okay. And it's not an acceptable benchmark for a progressive city to give an automatic exemption that removes oversight, accountability, and an ability for the city to take action if required.
Please wrap up.
When the Ontario government looked at this in 2009, they didn't exempt CASA. BC, which was mentioned in the CASA letter, has a program in place that has accountability to the public, that has conditions, and despite what was said in the CASA letter, they actually don't require accreditation for mobile shows. They vet those shows themselves. I think we need a system in the city that is more open and accountable and that allows the city some level of control and an ability to properly address public concerns. The reality is it's only a small number of businesses. It won't be a burden on the city to...
Thank you, Mr. Lilo.
I hope you support the staff recommendations.
Any questions? Yes. Councillor De Vermeerker, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. How would you respond to people, because, you know, certainly I've been in, we're all adults and we've all seen sort of exotic animals being sent to kids' birthday parties, et cetera, where somebody says, well, the hedgehog is cute and therefore my son or daughter should have the right to pet a hedgehog. Is that good for the hedgehog and is it good for the kids? And what do you think the implications of giving people pythons and hedgehogs and kangaroos are?
There are all kinds of implications. It horrifies me to see some of the creatures that are taken out, particularly reptiles, some of the birds, amphibians, and young ruminants who are taken into things like seniors' homes and daycare centers, because if you look at all the public health advisories from numerous cities, from numerous states and provinces, and from the CDC, you see that a lot of these animals pose significant disease risks to vulnerable members of the population. So kids that are 5 and under, the elderly, immunocompromised people, pregnant women, yet a lot of these organizations and businesses seem to operate with no understanding of what the risks are, and they're largely based on contact. So there's ramifications in terms of public health and safety, but yes, there are ramifications for the animals themselves. You know, a lot of animals, when they're shunted from one place to another, they're in conditions that are very unlike the conditions they may have at their home base. So let's take reptiles, for example. You know, reptiles are not easy to care for animals. You can care for them badly and they'll stay alive, some species, for a long time, but to care for them properly, they require very particular kinds of environments. They require microclimates that are within the thermal range that they would inhabit in the wild that allow them to engage in thermoregulatory behaviors and movements. They have all kinds of other things in their behavioral repertoire that they want to express that they can't. And when you take them out, you know, you're confining them. There are new vibrations, sounds, new sights. They may perceive being handled as a predatory attack. Some of them may be subject to handling stresses that raise their metabolism and have the possibility of killing them. There's all kinds of ramifications from the welfare perspective, as well as other types of issues that derive from taking animals out as well.
Great. And through Mr. Chair, because I know you've written a book at least on dogs, of a number, because I've read your
10 books now.
Dogs. But for people who want, I'll call them, they sort of said, well, children enjoy them and seniors enjoy them and it gives them peace. And if I get out of the hospital, it's great for my family members to have a animal, a kangaroo or something when they come home. Do you think that cats and dogs could play the same role? That if you get out of hospital or you want to educate children about how to love and care for animals, that we could send a cat or a dog?
Oh, absolutely. And in fact, that whole debate occurred with dolphin-assisted therapy. It's the short form is DAT. A lot of the people who were actually quite predatory, they were looking for adults with autistic children that were desperate to try to help their children, so they would charge them ridiculous amounts of money to come and swim with dolphins under this claim that it would somehow help their kids, and there's no proof for it. You know, you could accomplish the same type of benefit, if it occurs at all, with autistic children with guinea pigs or with dogs or with cats. It's the same type of thing. And certainly when you're looking at exotics, you can do the same thing. You can have dogs, cats, you can have guinea pigs and other pocket pets, maybe a few other creatures. You don't need those exotics to accomplish what you want to accomplish in terms of that kind of result. You don't need the exotics for that. And in fact, I think the cost to the animals is so great that it really weighs against any benefit that might derive from it. But yeah, it can be accomplished in other ways.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Is Councillor Doucette, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Councillor Deputation just asked my question about dogs and cats and the calming, relaxing effect. We heard from one of the deputants that she had been fostering some animals, and I'm afraid I sort of cringed when I heard she fosters a kangaroo. Would a kangaroo not need a lot of outdoor space, even though they're small, the Joey is small? Would they not need a lot of outdoor space to run around and get exercise?
Well, and more importantly than that, and yes, they do require space, they do require particular kinds of conditions, because when you think about it, these animals have evolved to live in particular kinds of habitats, particular kinds of environments and social contexts, and those aren't replicated when you have them in any kind of captive situation. Now, some are better than others, there's a continuum. But when you take that animal that's very young, what you're doing is you're removing it from its normal social developmental process, because it is being with its mother in the pouch. It would venture out, but it would stay close to the mother and the other members of the mob and would learn from them. And for a lot of animals, that type of social context and learning curve when they're young is extremely important in their mental development. And that allows them to be what they are when they get older, that whole process. So, you see this a lot with lion cubs. You see this with other animals. I've seen it with places in Toronto where they take that lemur or that kangaroo and they get it when it's a baby, because then the hope is that it will become more tractable and more docile and less of a hazard to the people who handle it. But yeah, it's really bad for the animals. It completely puts them into an alien situation. They won't have any type of normal social development process, not even like you would have in a zoo like Toronto Zoo. And as far as I'm concerned, it's all bad for the animal.
So if someone had found and had a kangaroo as a pet, and it either outgrew or they didn't want it anymore, where would you recommend they take that animal? Would it be somewhere like Toronto Zoo?
Well, it really depends, because a lot of the facilities are actually at capacity now, but there are ways of disposing of animals. In fact, my organization has done that. We've moved whole zoos full of animals. We've moved everything from lemurs to elephants and placed them all over the country. We've moved animals to California, to Colorado, different parts of Canada. So it's a matter of reaching out to that community, whether it's the welfare community that deals with these types of situations, the zoo community, the sanctuary community, or even in some cases, the wildlife rehabilitation community who deal with permanent captives. There's not, I'm not going to lie to you and say, it's super easy all the time, because it's not. But there are ways of moving these animals into circumstances that are better. And for some of them, the reality is that, particularly animals like some of the reptiles, there really isn't a lot of placement opportunities. And I would say that, knowing that and understanding the realities of the situation for those animals, that we've got to make some of the tough decisions. And if there are no good homes, let's not relegate them to some situation where they're going to suffer for the rest of their lives. Let's do the right thing. And, if there are no other good options, euthanize those animals. But, having said that, I would say that for a lot of animals, if you are in the right circles, there are opportunities for placement.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Councillor Doucette. Anyone else? Any other questions? Thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you.